So let me first move on to the Economic Corridors program that we have been working in India. We have designed something called the East Coast along with the Andhra Pradesh government. We have prioritized 2 priority nodes and done the master planning of these 2 priority nodes in Vizag and and the other in Srikalahasti. In terms of, you can take a look at the slides, you can see the kind of industries. Vizag is of course a brownfield, very dynamic brownfield cluster. Our initial investment out here is to remove the binding constraints which are existing in Vizag, and looking at the 2 other greenfield locations that we have here in Vizag, and also looking at in Srikalahasti, which along with the existing other clusters forms a very dynamic, in fact has the potential to emerge into a very dynamic industrial cluster. And these are very well served by the ports out there, both in the northern cluster and in the southern cluster of Krishnapatnam and Chennai. So if you look at the major highlights of the master plan exercises, we have master planned around 33,500 acres, 11 industries with 17 subsectors, which is expected to generate over 1.7 million of jobs in the next couple of decades. And in the immediate run, in the next 3 to 5 years, projects worth over 4 billion have been identified. Now, all the detailed land use planning of these zones have been done. I will not go through in the detail. But just to let you know of the 2 greenfield projects that we are looking at is at Achutapuram and Nakapalli. Together, I think it's around, the startup area is around 1,600. And we also kind of mapped the industries that are likely to be located in these 2 greenfield locations in Vizag. The other one which we are looking at the startup is in the southern part, which is in Srikalahasti, and the startup area is around 4,000. Now, land availability is quite attractive here. As you can see in the Vizag node, by April 2018, we are expecting 90% of the land to be available. And for the south block, around 75% of the land to be available by middle of this year. Now, this exercise has been done more with a demand-driven exercise, where we have identified the likely anchor investors who are going to be in these locations. And based on the needs of these anchor industries, we have then planned the infrastructure. So if you look at the connectivity part of it, the NH16 is the network. And if you look at some of these, part of this network, it's quite congested. So which we are working on, and NHAI is working on improving these networks. But more specifically, our work will focus on strengthening the grid networks to the hinterland where the production centers or the demand centers are. Similarly, we are looking at the rail networks. Here we have tried to look at the supply chain networks and then link it up where the railway interventions need to be done and where these clusters are both in the north and southern part of the state. Now, in the urban, we have done both the planning for the urban transportation system, because you have these 2 greenfield, and we have tried to do a planning where the commute time, both of the workers, the supervisors, and the managers, are limited within 30 minutes from where they work. So we have tried to do urban transport planning, and then we have mapped what is the need for urban utilities because of additional amount of workers that will be in these clusters. So if you can see that, similarly, we have mapped out the existing impact of these extra additional workforce and the kind of upgradation of urban infrastructure that is needed. Based on that, we have prioritized the investment. So if you see in the initial years, it's more of the trunk infrastructure in these nodes. But as we go forward, it is more of the urban infrastructures which needs to be upgraded quite heavily in these industrial nodes. So before I sum it, let me end that ADB, through its Vizag Chennai Industrial Development Program, is partnering very closely with Andhra Pradesh to build infrastructure, institutions, streamlined processes. Particularly, we are very pleased to see the setting up of the Andhra Pradesh Industrial Development Corridor Authority, the APIGDA, and also streamlining of the processes. And we are also working on the skills component of how to enrich the human capital within this corridor. Thank you very much.
We're going to share her experience on how Russia funded infrastructure projects. Over to Olga.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this session. And I would like to SMEs. We are more than 5,000 companies based everywhere in Russia. Somehow, all our companies, I mean, most of them, they have participated in different infrastructure projects. And keeping in mind that India and Russia have very good long-lasting relationship in different spheres, I would say that both countries, they face more or less similar challenges. Somehow, based on the experience that we have from our companies, from different areas, we have figured out a few ways of how it is better to finance the infrastructure projects. Of course, first of all, it is the classical means of financing, that is going to the bank and getting the loan, or going to the leasing company. That the leasing business is becoming more and more flourishing in Russia, and there are many companies who are there are many companies who are enjoying really good conditions in leasing now, and the new form of the so-called innovative leasing provides lots of opportunities for infrastructure projects. Also, we use different investment funds for financing of our projects. We have participated in different tenders, including Far East development funds, who actually help us in making our railroads and the airports. We also have few terminals in our east to be constructed on the shared basis. And apart from that, of course, what we have figured out is that the best way of financing the infrastructure project is the public-private partnership. If we speak about Russia, then the best actually way of having that agreement is when a private company comes with the money and government comes with the subsidies. Somehow both parties are enjoying very good conditions. And if we speak, for example, about shipping or port infrastructure, so in Russia right now, what we do is private companies, they come with the investments, and government, it subsidizes either the interest rate, or it provides the payment, it refunds 2/3 of the construction price, for example. And taking into consideration that generally it is a very long money, starting from, let's say, 10, 15 years, this project becomes very valuable for both parties, and both private companies and government, they are enjoying long-lasting relation with constant cash flow income. Somehow I can't but mention that we really look forward to having different international cooperation. Since we're in BRICS company, I would say, with quite powerful friends like India. So we also are looking forward to participating in different international and some mutual projects. And I have already figured out that Andhra Pradesh is a wonderful state where we can enjoy, where we can get maybe very good, make very good cooperation and get good results. Somehow I also welcome you to come to Russia. This year we are hosting a World Cup, so the country is completely changed and it is waiting for you. So please come, and in case you need some help or anything else, you just call Business Russia, and we would gladly help you together on your personal and both personal and business visits. Thank you.
And we'll be able to utilize your experience. Now I request Mr. Jeffrey Clements, Chairman, Commonwealth Infrastructure Partners. He's going to address us on how to improve the organization capacity by bettering project implementation and using finance as another resource.
Congratulations on a wonderful partnership summit. I've had the pleasure of participating in all 3 summits here in the past 2.5 years, and the progress and development that you can observe in Andhra Pradesh during these 3 summits is absolutely remarkable. So we all give great congratulations to the Chief Minister and everyone working with him and participating in this great development. I would like to spend a few minutes just focusing on an area that is very often neglected or only partially considered in the development of infrastructure projects and infrastructure financing. And that, I'll use the phrase, organizational capacity building. Very often this is neglected. I've just been invited to deliver project management workshops for a large infrastructure finance company in Calcutta. And what they've described to me is that although money is available, projects are available, expertise is available, the difficulties that they have in organizing the financial resources and the physical resources effectively and delivering the projects on time and within budget. And very often these are straightforward matters that are concerned with the phrase that I've used, organizational capacity. So organizational capacity building is so important in all these areas, and it runs through every single stage of a project, from its initial concept to the financial planning, to the project implementation stage, project management, supervision, project handover when the project is going to be delivered to a public sector organization, and so on. And as we've seen in a number of the sessions in this summit, methods and technologies are developing so quickly. So if you have an infrastructure project, for example, for an airport or a port or a highway, you can't just use the methods that would have been used 1, 2, 3, 4 years ago, because those methods are now obsolete. Due to developments in digital technologies, which are really disruptive, they're non-linear in nature, one has to use the most recent methods and really be future-proof to use methods that are going to withstand the test of time. But also methods of funding, methods of financing. These are also evolving at a very rapid pace. And again, you can't just Xerox a financial plan for a project that was implemented 2 or 3 years ago. You have to develop everything using the most recent methods and the most recent technologies. One method that I'm fond of using is what I'd like to call the capacity building triangle. Very often projects fall flat or fail to deliver completely because of a mismatch in understanding between what we could say on one side is the management capability and on the other side is the technical or technological capability. Too often, and this is very often seen in the public sector, that managers are not familiar enough with the specialities of the sector in which they're working, and those who are involved in the technical development aren't sufficiently au fait with the management responsibilities and structures in the organization and in their project. And it's a matter of bringing those capabilities together, first of all, horizontally between the management and the management and the technical functions, but also vertically through all the different levels of the organization. So these are the areas that I feel are vital to include in the best resources of financial and physical resources for any project to make sure that projects can be delivered well and that projects are really superlative in nature. And in this, I think we really have to applaud everything that has been done in Andhra Pradesh over the last few years from a brand new state. And so in my observations in the last 2 to 3 years is that many of these elements are really being considered in a very detailed way. I think we were all very heartened to see the emphasis on education and training, the very efficient skills ministry and the other ministries in the Andhra Pradesh government and their links to public and private sector education organizations, which are really driving this forward. And I think we all look forward to seeing so much more progress taking place over the next.
We have 6 concessions operating all across India. We are also into special economic zones and free trade warehousing zones. So the opening presentation my respected colleague on the panel made, which was about industrial zones and attracting pharma companies, auto companies, and other companies from the manufacturing sector. This was definitely music to my ears because this will play in very well with Make in India to generate more cargo for the ports that we've actually built. Andhra Pradesh has been foremost in attracting port investments. We have some world-class ports in Andhra Pradesh, and among the other two states in India, Andhra Pradesh has been absolutely the foremost in developing ports, which is basically testament to the fact that port-led infrastructure development definitely enables manufacturing to thrive. So these industrial zones, I have no doubts, will actually be immensely successful because of the connectivity that the ports would actually build. The other point that I wanted to make is that the road and rail connectivity is also extremely important, and I was very happy to note that in the presentation as well, that these industrial hubs will be very closely connected to the ports and the other industrial hubs in the country.
Julian Bevis, Senior Director, Group Relations South Asia from Maersk Group. He's going to talk about how to attract investments into logistics and infrastructure. May I request you?
Privilege of allowing me to speak at this very impressive conference. It is really impressive to see so much focus going on attracting investment and to see the partnership which clearly is evolving between government at the state level here and industry of all sorts and kinds. The kind of industry I'm going to be talking about just for a few minutes is the logistics industry. I was introduced as somebody who was going to speak about ways in which one attracts finance. I must make it very clear that I'm not a financial person and therefore I'm not going to go into the details of financial arrangements. What I am going to talk about, half a dozen, I think, of the sort of key policy areas that policy makers must think about when setting up infrastructure projects. And as I said, I'm talking about logistics infrastructure predominantly, and how they might address some of those policy settings with a view to attracting the finance, which in turn obviously will attract, hopefully, the necessary infrastructure from that and let the market do it. That is not, certainly in the infrastructure space, has to be allowed to evolve. Infrastructure, certainly logistics infrastructure, is a long game. Things last for 30 and 40 years, and over that time the competitive, commercial, legislative environment will change. It therefore follows that the rules around a particular project must also be allowed to change. This is a very tricky policy area because it invites all sorts of difficult conversations, but it is one I think that regulators need to face up to. The third point, which leads on from that, is that we need to try and move away, if we can, from the notion that infrastructure is just about steel and concrete and cranes and railway lines and all the rest of it. As much as anything, infrastructure is about the regulatory environment. What are the rules? What are the rules that statutory bodies who impact the operation of that piece of infrastructure will abide by? And how will the operators of a particular project, for example, be rewarded?
Julian said, extremely well organized. Good morning. I'd like to draw reference to the Honorable Chief Minister's opening remarks yesterday, where he said that the imperative really was integrating Andhra Pradesh and indeed India with global value chains. And a big part of that integration, or the success of that integration, will depend on connectivity. Connectivity to and from in terms of connecting trade and enabling trade. And although it has been for many years a source of some anxiety that a lot of East Coast India's trade actually flows over Colombo, we do not, as a port, we do not compete with any port in India. In fact, we complement all ports in India because we provide connectivity of the kind and nature in terms of timeliness, in terms of access, that exceeds any other regional port in terms of access to markets. So So Colombo and Sri Lanka are tied inexorably to India's growth and India's growth aspirations, and ours are dependent on that. Colombo's port industry over the last 30 years, in 2017, the Port of Colombo was ranked 23rd in the world with a throughput of slightly over 6 million TEUs of containers. And over half of that volume is to and from India. So we are an integral part of India's connectivity and India's integration with the value chains that these states hope to aspire to. The second thing is that the alternatives, again, would other hubs. And whilst Sri Lanka has probably caused some anxiety in terms of various investments that have been made in the recent past, I think there should be no doubt that the absolute viability of Colombo and the dependence that Sri Lanka has in terms of and the advantages it offers Indian trade.
Dignitaries on the dais, very respectful dignitaries of the dais, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure to present to you some aspects of what we are doing in the connectivity field, but relating to communications. Generally, Ministry of Communications is a very low-profile department. We generally do not participate in this. It's one of the first partnership summits which we are participating. But there are certain very important aspects which we thought we will showcase the general public about what are the changes likely to be expected over the next 3 to 6 months, which may have far-reaching implications in the way business is conducted in this country. ICT-led. And we call it Make in India 2.0 because we find that when you get into an industry 4.0, you require a different set of rules and guidelines, and the manner of doing business would be a little different. And therefore, the way Make in India is construed would be a little different as well. And how are we looking at Industry 4.0? We look at Industry 4.0 as to creating 100 million jobs. I mean, we find that any amount of technological innovation in industry would be meaningless if we are able to not generate livelihoods by creating 100 million jobs. And when we talk about Make in India, we find that we require new policy which focuses on entrepreneurship as the way forward to creating employment rather than come. The present date set is the maturity date for 5G. Repeat, the maturity date for 5G is set to be 2022, with the standards getting finalized as early as 2019. And it could be a little early because your Tokyo Olympics is going to have a demonstration, a full-fledged demonstration of 5G technologies, and several countries, and Russia is already here. Russia is having a good lead in certain aspects of 5G, particularly on the security systems. Several other countries, Korea is well ahead. US has already launched 5G. There are several applications which have already come over the last quarter. Britain has got a good ecosystem on 5G, and not to forget Japan, which is
the relationship that the United Kingdom has with India. And given that we are looking at Brexit, of course, it means that we want to expand our own footprint into new markets. And we believe in the UK that the opportunities that arise from our relationships that we already have here, that those relationships can only be strengthened from. And so looking at regulation, which is something UK has been extremely good at, and as a former minister, what I know about policy making and regulation is that if you want things to be an accepted elevator of business and industry, then what you don't do is put in place hurdles such as impractical regulations and unworkable policies. And so I think the opportunities that lie here between us and the UK is that we already have a stack of digital interventions that have helped us in the UK do business much more easier. We are one of the easiest places in the world to set up a business, to be able to deliver in a business, and that has been because we have made the processes much, much easier, but no processes here. And the final sort of remarks that I do have is around about sharing. Sharing our technologies, sharing the ability for our inward investment to come and have an ease of being able to do partnership work with companies already here. That already know what the legal regulatory frameworks are here.
These parts, in a way I'm local here. We are delighted that CII and the state government both are hosting these conferences in Visakhapatnam. One of the cleanest cities in India, and we were fortunate this morning to hear Guruji Ravi Shankar ji giving his message to us. All this is fine. Technology will continue. Change is a continuous process. If we stop changing for the better, we start changing for the worse. Now, how do we harness this technology for the upliftment of mankind is going to be, I think, the serious challenge of the future. Of course, I'm from, temporarily I would say, connected with aviation. And aviation in India, in a way, is a success story. We were the last, about 3-4 years back, we were considered the 9th largest aviation market in the world and domestically, and now we are probably already reached the 3rd place in the world. But aviation is all about connecting people. Of course, it has a multiplier effect in the economy, both in jobs and in investment. India is a big country, and economically it is behaving properly. It's going ahead. In fact, if I present the aviation scenario, roughly 70 years into independence, 73, 74 destinations where commercial aircraft would connect. And since this regional connectivity has come on, we are looking at 80 destinations. Adding up, probably not many countries will have that many destinations. India is a vast country. Aviation should not lose its focus of people. Of course, burning fuel is a highly polluting activity also. But Indian airports have already 90 megawatts of solar, a ballpark figure of 1 megawatt to 1 ton of CO2 in gases. And this is going to go up. Any technology, any activity has to ultimately benefit people. If it doesn't benefit people, it doesn't make sense. Here in Andhra Pradesh, probably even technology is making language, it's becoming a language neutral like thing. So a technology will be able to open the world to the thoughts of the world. But these parts, the dominant language is Telugu. And in Telugu culture, we have a poet here called Gurjada Apparao. He also was from these parts. He showed a way out. Regulations are all fine, laws are all fine, policies are fine, but people matter. Particularly in the social structure. Pre-independence, the British ruled us. They allowed certain socially bad practices to happen. There was a practice in these parts where the girl child used to be sold to elderly old people, literally as their slaves. It used to be called Kanya Shulkam. Some of the locals, forward-looking people at that particular point of time, they said, the British, since you are ruling us, you should give us a legislative framework to overcome this problem. It is the genius of Gurjada Apparao, when that opportunity was denied, to come out with a play. I don't know how much Shakespeare impacted Britain, but Gurjada Apparao definitely impacted the Telugus, and that play generated such an awareness that this social evil was removed. Come independence, that evil practice was also not there. So nobody needed a legislation. I don't have to tell Indians. Social legislation, we have had the Anti-Dowry Act for decades, but nobody in their right minds believes that India has eradicated the evil practice of dowry. Regulation has to be meaningful. What is the regulation for? It is to see that any nefarious activity does not come out of the activity that happens. Now, the good should be encouraged, the bad should be discouraged. So obviously regulation will need attention. I'm asked, why don't we have regulation for drones? It's a new area. Drones' capabilities are tremendous. In fact, state governments are using drones nowadays, and you would have seen drone-related surveys also happening. It obviously has a humanitarian use also, but it needs regulation. It should not carry a payload, should not be so unidentifiable that it can become a threat to human life. This is an important thing. Policy, again, policies are for a particular purpose. They are not truth for all time. They are not religions that are truth for all time. But without proper policies, economic activity does not feel comfortable in investing. So that's why in aviation we brought out a policy, and we have taken India to a different level. Of course, the same thing can apply to all economic activity. So it is nice, it is lovely to see all of you here today, because it is a people-to-people contact. You can communicate any type of information, and probably as days go by, these things will become faster and faster. But I think in the human race, the human being is the most important person, most important thing. And that should never be lost sight of. I know we are all responsible people. We have come here to interact on economic activity, create jobs, and solve some of our problems. So, we are with you. Government of India is with you. Of course, the state government is also with you. So, let us go in that direction and help the human race in raising its standard of life. Thank you one and all. Jai Hind.
Like, very connected with the local people, which like I'm also a local, so I understand what you're saying. Thank you very much. Like, you have taken the subject to the to a different level, and the connectivity and communication is talked about at a different in a different platform. With this, we have just come to the end of the session. Let me see if I have some more time. What time is the next session? Can I? 5 minutes? Thank you so much. Is everyone okay with a Q&A? I know you have some time constraints. Other than my fellow panelists, can I go ahead with the Q&A? No? All right. So we'll take the questions off the dais. So I'll conclude the session. I have some gentlemen who have to leave. First of all, I want to thank all my fellow panelists for sticking to the time with no time overrun. We have completed the session well within time. And I want to thank all of you for joining us here in Visakhapatnam. We have come from your respective countries and cities and being a part of this partnership summit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Our next session